Now, Dave G8GKQ really needs little introduction to us all, I'm sure, as he's been a very active member of BATC for a long time and has led the BATC Portstand project for 7 years now. He's also held many roles in the club, including chairman, and he's currently our treasurer. Here he is today to talk about the loss of a key component in modern ATV, the Serit tuner, whose stocks are now exhausted and we need to find a new solution. As always, please feel free to ask questions and make comments using BATC messaging or YouTube chat anytime during Dave's presentation, and I'll read them to him at the end. So welcome to you, Dave. We can't hear you, I believe.
Yes, we can.
Or can we?
Oh, good.
Oh, right, that's okay. I wasn't hearing you in my earpiece. Sorry, that was my fault.
No problem. Thank you very much, David, and thanks to everybody else who's presented so far. Right, I'm just going to start up the slideshow because I'm having some issues here. And if I do that, and then, hang on.
We should just explain, this is a hot seat changeover, we used to call it in the Beeb. Where you literally have taken over, although you're miles away, I'm sure, from Mike. But
right,
you know,
okay.
I can buy you a little bit of time if you like by going.
No,
through
that's right. Hopefully, you now have my slides up.
I think so. Just ask Tammy. Yep, we've got those. Fine, thank you.
Brilliant. Okay, excellent. My apologies. I've up until 2 minutes ago, I was transmitting on QR100, and that was the hottest part of the changeover. So, right. I'm going to talk about replacing the mini tuner. As you know, we've run out, having ordered 400 in our last order, and we should actually have ordered more, but can't win them all. So what I'm going to talk about is why we need to replace it, some initial thoughts, have a look at the promising options, and what next. Now, we haven't sat idle on this. The picture there is of one of the candidate tuners we looked at before we got to this stage, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. The FTS 4334 and 4335, they're both essentially the same tuner that we've used now for about 4 or 5 years, one with a preamp, one without. We think it was it's specifically built really for test equipment. So it wasn't a large, it's never been in large production, and production has now ceased. We thought the ICs that were used in it were no longer available. But we now think we might be able to get hold of some. But there appears to be no simple replacement on the market. So our initial thoughts, and I put out a paper about this on the forum about 2 weeks ago, was could we use new software with an existing tuner? Say, for example, the one I just showed. Or should we build a new tuner with new software? Or could we use an SDR or tuner chip with a custom FPGA and some new software? Or can we do it all with a software-defined radio and custom software on a PC, or even, and this came up during the process, the Raspberry Pi 5. Since I put out the paper, we've found that the ICs in the existing tuner, the FTS 4334, 4335, may still be available. So we're investigating that. The SI266D is a demodulator IC, and that's used in the SF808, a commercial satellite receiver that does do reduced bandwidth, and that seems to be easily available. And people have commented that they have used SDR Angel, which is usable but quite fiddly. So we're looking at investigations. Can we source chips and build perhaps an FTS 434 lookalike? Or how practical is it to use the SI266? Or perhaps could we get a more usable version of SDR Angel? Let's go into details on each of those. If we were able to get the STV6120 and STV0910, that's the tuner and demodulator chips for the FTS4334, we would probably put them on a single PCB with a surface mount 74HC10, just as like is in the conventional tuner, the current tuner. And we'd probably, instead of using the USB module, we'd put the USB chip on the board with the power supply on the board and possibly some amplifiers on the front end. Now, of course, the amplifiers used in the original tuner were custom or seem to be fairly special to type amplifiers that are actually controlled by software for their gain in the version of the tuner that had the preamps in, but they're not essential. So that's one line of investigation, and that hinges on probably three things. Can we get the STV6120? Can we get the STV0910? And can we get a PCB made up for it? The STV0910 is quite a challenging chip to mount on a PCB. If you think what Mike has just demoed, we're talking about a chip with 160 connections. So we've got some challenges there if we do that. A second option, this came out of discussions really with Martin, M0LNG, last weekend, would be to use the SI266D, and he's proposed this very comprehensive solution. We'd use an RFFC 5072, which is a PLL and mixer chip on the front end. Now, he has experience of using this on the HackRF, and that would give us a possible input range of anything from 1 to 6,000 megs. We then need to have a 0IF tuner. We'd use a conventional satellite one like the MAX 2120 that's easily available. And then use the SI2166D for demodulation, and then go into our normal FT2232. So that is another solution we have under investigation. The disadvantage of that compared with the let's build a substitute for the previous tuner is that we would also need to amend all the long-mind, ride and ports down software and open tuner software to work with this. And of course it would not work with the Windows Mini Tuner software. However, the advantage is longevity of supply of the chips. The third option we're giving serious consideration to is a version of SDR Angel that works really well for DATV. I'm getting mixed messages on whether a Raspberry Pi 5 is going to be up to the job. Some people say it will, some people say it won't. Certainly a Raspberry Pi 4 won't be. Could do it on a high-end PC. Then we have to look, are we limiting ourselves to Windows, or is there a Linux solution to this? Currently, I'm aware SDR Angel, you need to set the FEC. Now, that's not particularly convenient for QO100, where you don't really know what somebody's FEC is until you look at their signal. And the last thing we want to look at is there a performance penalty for using software? Currently, people have done trials. It's 1 to 2 dB worse using a software designed, a software decoder than using the hardware decoder. But we need to go into that with our eyes open. So what are we doing at the moment? It's early days, but we are checking the availability of supply of all these chips. Having to think about the performance issues. One of the things I'm personally worried about is that how well does the SF8008 tuner, we're lucky in that we can test this new IC in an existing setup. How well does it work in the presence of adjacent signals? That was a problem we had with the old Sharp tuner when we came to use it on QO100. It didn't handle adjacent equal level or stronger signals very well. So we need to look at that to make sure we do come up with a solution that is practical. we need to estimate the costs. Are these chips too expensive to buy? How much will the PCBs cost to fabricate? And clearly, as we're using surface mount, we're going to get somebody to put these boards together for us. What is the cost going to be? Now, when you think that 4 years ago we were paying £100 more or less for the Portsdown filter modulator board, which had a lot cheaper silicon on it and was a lot less complex, the cost could be significant if we're not careful. And then lastly, what's a credible manufacture and sales model for BATC? Who takes care of boards that don't work when they've been built? Who bears the cost of that? How do we do returns for people who have problems with boards? How much risk do we put the club to financially? So there are a number of issues to look at there before we just go out, do a KiCad design and get a fab house to build it for us. But anyway, that activity is all ongoing. And I just wanted really to give this update of where we'd got to and let you know that there is an awful lot going on behind the scenes trying to solve the issue. So with that, David, I'm ready to take any questions that people have.
Okay, Dave, thanks very much. Yes, and I, doing my homework for this, again, looking at that, you've got a 4-page comprehensive document covering a lot of the challenges, haven't you, about this replacing it. So if you didn't catch everything that Dave said and you want to look at it in more detail, that's available on the forum. I think I downloaded that from the BATC forum.
Correct.
So please look.
Yeah.
We've had a few bits of feedback, but this is a great time for you to let us know what you think as well. And I'll start with someone we know very well, Everest F5 OEO. So if SI2166D not compatible with old software, not need the FT2232, as we could use Raspberry Pi Pico over Ethernet. That's a Brian project, he says, and I guess that doesn't mean anything to me, but maybe to you, Dave.
Yeah, it does. We need to look at how much we redesign at one stage, I think, Everest. I agree, a Raspberry Pi Pico could substitute for the FT2232 as an interface option. But if we are going to have a solution that works across all the existing receivers, the minimum amount of change that we can introduce, the better. If we were starting from scratch, Raspberry Pi Pico is definitely the way to go there. So that is another thing we are looking at, but we've got to take into account the whole software stack and future support of that software stack as well. Yeah. Thanks, Everest.
And I think that chip, that converts basically serial to USB, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, in fact, what we use it for is to convert parallel to USB, okay. And also to do the control channel back to the tuner.
Yeah, we've got to bear in mind. Sorry.
There's no reason we can't do that using a Raspberry Pi Pico and Ethernet. But the moment you introduce Ethernet into the equation, it's something you just can't plug into the side of a Portsdown.
No, and also drivers for the various chips, because the FT2232 series I know is well supported by drivers for most platforms. But again, that would complex that, and I'm sure we all appreciate all the work that you and everybody is doing on this. But it is a great time, everybody, now, if you're involved and interested in this project, to sort of have some input now. By the way, Everest also added chips should have an option to receive BB frame brackets, not only the transport stream.
Yeah, I suggest that's a nice to have. Most people want to watch TV, but it would be great to be able to enable the further experimentation that Everest wants to do. Sure.
Okay. Have we got any other questions from the community? I'm just having a look now. Mike G0LGF says, or JF says, we are amateurs, so do we take a risk with construction? I think what you're suggesting is that at least some of the SM chips should be pre-soldered on, probably by a specialist assembly house.
Yeah, the problem is that if these chips had leads coming out of the side, I would agree, but they're actually ball grid array chips, so they need to be reflow soldered on. So I think that's beyond a lot of
Yes.
most amateur capability, certainly beyond mine.
Yeah, Dave actually, just at the same time as I asked it, Dave M5TXJ asked the same thing, perhaps a PCB with the surface mount TV mounted. Corn ON70MOR says, why not use Pluto Lima Mini for receive?
That's fine, but it doesn't do the decode of the signal. The great the thing that's different about digital ATV is the error correction. We can get down to the resolving the constellation using a Lime or a Pluto simply, but then you need to go through the apply the forward error correction, and that's why in the software solutions, for example, you need an i9 class PC to do that error correction, or you need an FPGA or an ASIC, and that's the thing we're trying to replace. So that's the very difficult bit. I will just come back to PCBs. The other thing we have to consider with the PCB is if we do sell a partially populated PCB, where does the responsibility lie for, oh, this doesn't work? Is it the constructor we've sold it to who bears that responsibility, or will he come back to us and say, oh, the chip wasn't soldered on properly? So the moment you start selling these things, as opposed to doing it as just a small group of amateurs, things are a lot more difficult.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. And this is quite a lot of outgoing, potentially, I presume. You'd probably, from my knowledge of it, you'd need to order something, at least 100 of something like this to make it viable for a contract manufacturer to set up and producing. So from what you've said already, this is, we're into thousands of pounds, aren't we, of investment. So This is the club's money, which I guess is all of us as members' money. So yeah, this takes some thinking about. Jen G4HIZ says, would the original manufacturer allow a third party to use the design under license?
We don't know. We are contacting them to ask.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah. Everest again asks, ultimate goal should be to have a DVB-S2 DMOD on FPGA, but needs some skills in FPGA.
There is a Brazilian who was on the Q100 Net 3 weeks ago who proposed doing this and has the skills. One of the issues that we came up against there was he would need to buy a number of very expensive licenses in order to distribute the firmware. So yes, possible. He reckons it's about 80,000 elements in an FPGA to do it, so it's not easy. But at the moment, that looks to be one of the less likely, although a very possible solution.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just we're just trying to communicate with who we were hoping to take a feed from lunchtime. So forgive me, I haven't paid full attention to that because we're trying to contact Frank at the moment. Everest has said we could also investigate in DVB-S2 RX FPGA IP. I guess that's what you're talking about, the intellectual property, the IP that would need that, because actually, that's just for this. I'm always aware when we're doing this, we've got a couple of hundred people watching this now, and not all of them are going to be familiar with all these terms if they're, some of the older electronic engineers and wonder what an FPGA is. So is it worth us just talking briefly about that? It's programmable, isn't it? Field programmable gate array is what it means. So can you just tell us briefly what that is so that everybody at home understands?
Okay. It's a step forward from having an IC that you program before you make it and you put all the gates together. So you basically put a piece of data into an IC, and that tells it what gates to connect to what. So it tells it to connect an AND gate to the output of this OR gate, and then connect it to this pin, and to feed a clock into another another pin. So it's essentially a microcontroller controlled piece of logic. And when I was referring to 80,000 elements, we're talking about 80,000 gates and clock elements put together to decode DVB-S2.
That would take a lot of 7.4 series or 4000 series logic from my early days in Pi.
Yeah,
anyway.
Exactly. And there's a step on from that, which is the ASIC, the application specific integrated circuit. And this is where once they've done the FPGA work and they've said, oh, we've got a design now that works, they actually then put that into silicon that doesn't need programming. And that is what's used in our current tuners, is an application specific integrated circuit that does all this clever decoding that needs a Pentium i9 to do if you try and do it in software.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's hard to sometimes quantify, isn't it, how much processing power you need to do some of these things. I think we kind of take these things that we have in our pockets sort of fairly lightly until we pay for them maybe, and then realise all the technology involved, and we're trying to recreate this as a club. Dave, yeah. I think that's good. We've covered the sort of, I guess just looking ahead, if the club does go ahead and make something of its own, which has got a lot of advantages because we kind of be more in control of it, maybe that could be done on a pre-order system, something like that, where people have to pay at least a deposit because the club is clearly going to, outlay quite a lot of money to have that done. It's just looking ahead a bit when we've got a solution.
That's not so much of an issue. We think the demand is there, and the club is in a lucky situation in that it has the capital to be able to make most of the outlay, we think, at an affordable price. Clearly, if the price goes up a lot, we would have to think twice. But at the moment, we think the interest is there. It's just a matter of coming up with a credible solution that doesn't place the club in too much financial risk.
Sure, of course. Well, thank you for the work on this. So that consultation document you can find on the BATC forum, and I guess if there's anybody out there with the talents to maybe help, especially in this, then you'd love to hear from them.
We would, and I would ask people to contribute on the forum thread. There is a lot of discussion there already. So put it out there, and by sharing the knowledge, I'm sure we can get to a solution.
Great. Thank you, Dave. Thanks for this and all the work that you do for the club, and thanks for this update. Thanks very much.